Welcome to CineLit. My name is Adam Marsh, and I am joined by CineLit's resident expert, Daryl Buxton. Say hello, Daryl.
Hello.
And we are also joined again by Rebecca Taylor. Say hello, Rebecca.
Hi everyone.
Fantastic. So we are going to talk about the director Steve McQueen today, to coincide with the release of his new TV series anthology show that's coming out in November on the BBC iPlayer. So that should be a fun discussion. When I proposed doing Steve McQueen, for some reason I thought he'd done more movies, but he's only done 4 feature films. So it's like, okay, well that's manageable. Maybe we'll be able to do this podcast in under an hour today. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Okay, should we just crack off in chronological order? Let's start with Steve McQueen.
I'm going to say, was his first debut feature was Hunger, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Obviously, he'd had a very long and very successful career as a contemporary artist, video artist. He won the Turner Prize in the late 90s, in the same year as Tracy Emin had her Unmade Bed. That didn't win. He won. But obviously no one was speaking about his...
She got all the attention.
She absolutely did get all the attention. But he won that year, and so he was a well-established contemporary video artist who then moved into feature films with Hunger, and what a debut.
I know. I think before we get on to talking about his individual films, I think it ought to be stressed that I think he brings his video art style to his movies, and I think this is something we'll talk about as we go on each film. You know, I like looking at how filmmakers work, all sort of ties together, and I think he's got trademarks within cinema that are he's sort of made his own. Like he uses long held shots quite often. He uses extremely long takes as well, which is different. You know, he'll use sort of held static shots, but he will also do long dramatic takes and also long dialogue scenes. And I think all of this sort of stems from when you're watching his films, you suddenly get sort of 20 minutes in or half an hour in, and you're suddenly presented with like a 15-minute, almost like something that would have been in an art installation or something, and yet he's getting away with that in commercial cinema, which is brilliant. So, and I think it's important to talk about that before we talk about his films in general, because I think his artistic vision sort of impacts on his work as a feature filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. What do you reckon, Becky?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what I was going to go on to say was just that actually that's the only Steve McQueen film I haven't seen, Hunger.
Right. He's one of those filmmakers that I feel when I first watched his features, I wasn't as familiar with his artwork prior to this, but I had that 70s vibe from him. That he was a director akin to a Martin Scorsese, akin to those sort of like where their visions of the films
very much
was so strong that in his debut feature he could pretty much make the film he wanted to make. There's no sort of like paying your dues or anything like that when coming through film. He started off with Hunger, and he started off exactly where he wanted to start off in film, and yeah, what a debut.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk at the moment because the BFI are bringing out a box set of old Play for Today shows from the BBC from the 70s and early 80s, and there's a lot of debate about, you know, would Play for Today be something that you could sort of revive and bring back into the modern era. And I think Hunger, it's 12 years old now, Hunger, but it's a modern movie, and that really does play like an old BBC Play for Today. It would have fitted right on TV in sort of 1981, 82 had it been made then, and it would have been very controversial had it been made then too. You know, I think it's not controversial when it was made.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it really does fit that, and that I think again ties in with that sort of 70s mould of the artist who is absolutely uncompromising and just goes out and makes the film that he wants to.
Well, maybe that's coming full loop with his new show Small Axe, which is effectively like Play for Today.
I think so. I think he's almost like a one-man revival of that. We'll see with that show, but I think everything I've heard and read about it suggests that it is going to be in that sort of arena.
Yeah, there's the anthology series, because obviously during lockdown there was the Alan Bennett remakes of Talking Heads, and yeah, it seems like something that the BBC thing are bringing back, sort of the anthology series of the 70s and things. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he's got 3 of 5, I believe, that I've already debuted at festivals already. Lovers Rock, Mangrove, and Red, White, and Blue have all played at various
they've been
festivals.
presented as feature films as well. Yeah, they've played at film festivals. So,
And weren't they going to also play at Cannes if it wasn't cancelled?
Oh yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a name enough director. I think that a showcase of Steve McQueen, brand new Steve McQueen, would not go amiss. Like the notably snooty Cannes for they don't like TV, do they? They had to have a big exception and call Twin Peaks' 16 episode series.
18, yeah.
It's 18 episode series of the new Twin Peaks as a film.
And I can see this being the same. They present this, and film festivals have been presenting it as though it's 5 new movies.
Yeah.
And they're going on the BBC, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's country and Prime.
What an amazing advertisement for the BBC iPlayer, though. You know, that's well. Let's move on. Let's move on to Hunger then. So it's one Becky hasn't seen, but we screened it when we first opened in 2008 here in Derby. It was released within about a month of us opening, and it was one of the very first big releases that we showed on our screens. You know, when we opened, and it's a difficult watch. The story of Bobby Sands and his hunger strike. He was in prison for being involved in the IRA bombings and went on a hunger strike. And very well reported case, very big news story of its time, and dramatised in 2008's Hunger.
Yeah.
I guess it is a great film. I guess it's really built around Michael Fassbender's amazing performance.
Yeah. The one sort of trope of Steve's cinema that I didn't mention before was his partnership with Fassbender, and Fassbender's maybe gone a little bit off the boil now, and he wasn't in Steve's last movie, which we'll talk about later. But I think he's not getting the parts that he was sort of 5-10 years ago, and I think his partnership with McQueen was really potent, and I think you were getting his very, very best cinema work there. I think it was a good relationship for Michael Fassbender. I think he was really being challenged by these roles, and yeah, Hunger's the first one, and right off the bat you've got a director-actor partnership there that is looking really solid and something that's really potent and got real potential. And Fassbender's sort of unusual casting as Bobby Sands, because he doesn't particularly look like him, but I think he really inhabits the part and gets the character and gets what the Maze prison protests were all about. The film's great. It's so unconventional. As I say, it's. I was talking earlier about how McQueen approaches his films like he approaches his video installations and so on. And Hunger's almost like a sort of feature-length depiction of that, you know, representation of that. It's such an unconventional movie because it focuses on the 1981 protests, the blanket protests, the dirty protests, and ultimately the hunger strike. But in doing that, it covers the whole history of the Irish Troubles, and it sort of pinpoints this one incident, but it sort of comments on the entire history going back to sort of 1916 or whenever, you know, and it's a great little microcosm of the relationship between the Irish people and the British Parliament. The movie makes you despise Margaret Thatcher ever more, you know. It's I'm not getting into that, but I could talk all day about that. But she doesn't come out of it well. You know, the Conservative Party, the British government, the establishment don't come out of this well.
It's fine to have that. We had the Iron Lady, which was the glorification of Maggie Thatcher. So there's balance here. Yeah,
yeah. What Steve McQueen does in the movie is he focuses on the day-to-day basics of the prison cell. You know, I think we only have 2 scenes outside the prison which involve the officer Lowen, played by Stuart Graham. We see him at the start of the film getting up in the morning and talking to his wife, and then checking under his car for bombs, as though it's routine. You know, that's something he obviously does every day. And then there's a scene later on where he visits his mother in a nursing home. Other than that, it's all set in the prison, and the characters, including Bobby Sands and depictions of other IRA members, they're almost background figures in the story, because what McQueen focuses on is the routine of day-to-day life in the prison, and the routine as well of the protests, and how these two sort of combine together. And you get incidents which are sort of audience challenging in a way. Like I think the most famous one is the shot of a prison officer cum cleaner who's sort of brushing piss and bleaching the corridor between the cells, and he's right at the back of the frame, and he sort of pushes his brush forward and forward and forward, and cleans all this stuff up, and McQueen just holds it for 3 minutes until he gets right into the foreground of the shot. And that could be tedious and boring, but I think the fact that he's someone who's worked in art installation and worked in video art makes that so meaningful and such an important scene in the film. And I can see some viewers being turned off by it, but I thought it was absolutely riveting and really made comments on all kinds of things within the situation of the story.
Well, like you say, he does like those long shots. In fact, it's a 17-minute unbroken shot in Hunger, which I think for a debut, again, a debut feature,
that's daring.
It's very daring. But then again, when you look back on it and you think, well, actually, he's not a first-time director. In many ways, he's not.
Sure, and I think these long takes are something that he's comfortable with as an artist. So again, it's not a challenge for him. This is something that he's done before. The only difference is he's now bringing it into the middle of a feature film. But what performances in that scene as well. Liam Cunningham and Fassbender playing the priest who comes in to talk to Bobby Sands. And this is when Sands actually tells him that the protest is going to be elevated. It's not just going to be the dirty protest anymore, the smearing of the cell walls with sort of foul substances. It's now going to be elevated, and they're actually going to die for their cause. And the priest has to sort of react to that. It's wonderfully played. Not only is it a 17-minute take, it's actually immediately followed by a 5-minute take of Fassbender solo, still talking to the priest. So in total, you get 22 minutes of this. Absolutely extraordinary. And to put that in the middle of a feature film is so brave.
Well, I think ultimately you put on screen something that's going to be interesting and keep the audience's attention. And in that scene particularly, nothing is more riveting than watching those two act.
Absolutely.
So having the camera unbroken for 17 minutes is not really a chore at that point.
No.
You know.
Well, it's so well done, and he's so confident in doing it, and his actors. I mean, actors love doing this sort of thing because they feel like they're on stage, don't they? And every actor wants to be on stage, so they just get into it. Apparently, they only did 5 takes, I've read of that, so then used the best one. I would imagine they just see that as rehearsal. You know, they just see that as glorified rehearsal, and I bet they all love doing that, and it shows on screen because it is. You know, we've used the word already. It's absolutely riveting. Becky, are we making this sound appealing to you? Is it a film you're going to go and see?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I do have it on DVD. I just never got round to watch it, obviously, because it's quite a tough subject.
I don't know, nice party Saturday night film. It's lovely, you know.
But I must say, I have always wanted to see it because I've always been a fan of Michael Fassbender, and I've also... obviously Steve McQueen, so I sort of went back to look at his other films. I think Steve McQueen didn't come fully on my radar until 12 Years a Slave, so I went back and bought all of his other DVDs. But I have yet to watch Hunger.
Yeah, that's interesting because obviously having been programming cinema since like 2008, 2009. He's been the one guy that's been there throughout my film programming career. You know, from very early when we opened up here, we had Hunger. A couple of years later, a few years later, we had Shame, and then 12 Years a Slave, and then Widows a few years ago.
Now, if he made more films, it'd make your job a lot easier.
It'd make my job a lot easier, yeah. But I'm hoping that diminishing returns, though, whether if he makes too many films, I mean, maybe he needs that time to gather his forces.
I think so, yeah.
So let's move on to the next film then in his career. He did a film called Shame, which I think is my favourite of his films.
Me too.
Oh, there you go.
Really?
In fact, it was my film of the year.
Same with me. Rarely, me and Darryl are on the same wavelength here. It was absolutely my favourite film of the year. I found it entirely engrossing. I thought it evoked. It very much felt like it was about sex addiction, but it felt more like Taxi Driver.
Yeah,
it felt like showing the griminess, the sleaziness of the city. Now,
and
rather than 1970s.
It's a very cold film as well, in the sort of David Cronenberg style, I think. But the opening shot is fascinating because it links this character with Bobby Sands.
The unbroken shot.
Yeah. You get the film again starts with a long static shot of Michael Fassbender, naked from the waist up, lying in bed, just staring into space, and it's held and held and held and held. And other than the fact that it's taking place in a sort of pristine apartment rather than a sort of shitty prison cell, it could be from hunger. Mm-hmm. In fact, one thing I'd like to say about those two films, they could almost swap titles. You could almost call Hunger Shame, in reflection of the shame of the British establishment sort of thing. And you could almost call this Hunger in terms of the character's sex addiction. So I think they're interestingly titled.
Well, I think they both have characters that are in prisons.
Yeah. And it forms a trilogy then with 12 Years a Slave,
sure.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which we can talk about when we get onto that movie. But he's locked in a prison of his own mind, sort of thing, and his own desires.
So Becky, when I said it's my favourite film, I heard a yelp of surprise there. Why did you feel that it was not your favourite film from the sound of it?
I don't know, actually. Now thinking about it a little bit harder, I wouldn't say it's my favourite. Just because it's slightly, unconventional and sort of obviously on purpose, removed. You don't have that relationship with the character. It's sort of distant, but obviously he's supposed to be. But yeah, it's not my favourite, but that's why I seemed shocked. But yeah.
Well, the thing I found really interesting about Shame when I watched it, it felt like a director fully in control of the camera, fully in control of the production, and on top form, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I felt
absolutely.
like every single scene, I had to watch every single scene because there's going to be something here in this scene that I need to watch to understand.
I think that's typified in the film by the way he shoots sex scenes, because there are a lot of sex scenes in the film, and yet it's. I don't know if Becky or yourself agree with this, Adam, but for me, it's not at all a sort of titillating film. It's not erotic, and because the character doesn't see sex like that, he's appalled by what's happening to him. He doesn't want to be living the life that he's living, and I think McQueen and Fassbender both get that across in the film. And so when he actually shoots sex scenes, especially the sort of threesome towards the end, is just. A lot of it's shot in close up, but it's not close ups of the bits that your voyeur might want to see.
Yeah, we're not talking Paul Verhoeven here.
Not at all. It's close ups of people's faces, almost in agony, and wondering what they're doing there. It's close ups of sort of shoulders and bits of the body that aren't in the least bit erotic, And it's just a brilliant way to sort of shoot that in a film that has got this topic. I can't think of another film that's tackled sex in this way at all.
No, I mean, I guess Lars von Trier had a crack at it with Nymphomaniac Part 1 and 2, particularly Part 2 more than Part 1, but he veers on the titillation side.
I was going to say, I might have a little bit of a crush on Michael Fassbender, so I was like, okay. Yeah, this sounds good. And I agree. It's not actually a film where I found him particularly attractive. So yeah, I think maybe that might be why it's not my favourite, in the sense that I was just disappointed. But yeah, I found more actually Carey Mulligan's character more interesting in the film and complex. Their relationship I found was more interesting and sort of yeah.
I think they're sort of two sides of the same coin almost. You know, they're almost one character, and they have got this brother sister relationship that sometimes suggests it's going to go a little bit further. But then by the end of the film, you know, they're almost the same person, you know, and they're sort of thinking each other's thoughts almost, and it's without sort of giving away what happens throughout the film and what happens towards the end. But I think they're two brilliant performances. Again, Carey Mulligan sort of disappeared in recent years as well, and she's so good in this. And again, she gets her own long take, which she has to handle very, very sort of intensely, where she's singing this sort of breathy version of New York in a bar as a sort of torch singer, and the camera again is just held on her face as she sings this sort of agonising version of the old Frank Sinatra favourite. And again, this is McQueen sort of playing with what cinema is and playing with the form of it and filming something that you could put in an art gallery.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think she's absolutely fantastic. I don't think she's surpassed this role.
Never.
And she's done some good roles since then. I mean, she was due to be in a film earlier this year, but that's been put back to later this year.
Most Promising Woman, is it?
Promising Woman, that's right, yeah. Which apparently, I mean, you've seen that one, haven't you, Becky?
Yeah, I saw it, and it's again very unconventional. Basically, sort of a rape revenge film, but she was phenomenal in it. But I actually saw a screen of it earlier this year, and I'd say it was one of my favourite films that I've seen this year.
Right, yes, because I think her and Michael Fassbender as well, because they are so attractive. I think that is kind of difficult once they become famous, and they become famous through these kind of roles, which they both did, arguably. I mean, Carey Mulligan maybe through other stuff, but they both seem to have an interest in making these kind of films. And I think when they get inside the business, they're not being put into those kind of films for like 2 or 3 years after they break. They get put in mainstream Hollywood films, I guess. She's in a period costume,
looking attractive.
Yeah. Here, Carey Mulligan, you were fantastic in that really gritty art house movie. What size bustier do you fit in for our costume, for our period costume drama that we're going to shove you in next? To be fair, they both look very, very attractive in Shame, but you wouldn't want to see their insides, would you? You know, you don't want to see the inside of their minds. No, and I think that's what they're interested in as actors. It feels like that's what they're interested in, particularly at that time in their careers.
Well, Becky, you say this new film is a rape revenge drama, and it'll be a rare case of an actress getting involved in something like this and it not being their most harrowing film, because I think she's been through that in the Steve McQueen movie. I think what she goes through in Shame is just terrifying.
Yeah. I don't think Most Promising Woman is that levels of intensity. Isn't it more a black comedy as well thrown in there?
Yeah, it's done as a dark comedy, but the undertones are around the in America, the rape scandal in universities and colleges. So that's sort of what it's mainly set around. But it's I think it'll get people talking once it finally is screened.
Yeah. I'm just glad to know she's still around, because I've not seen Carey in anything for a while, and I thought she'd sort of gone off the radar. The other actress I think who's worth a mention in Shame is I don't know how to pronounce her surname actually, Nicole Beharie or Beharie. She's in Miss Juneteenth at the moment, which is playing now, and but she gets a very, very long dialogue scene in a restaurant with Fassbender, which is another one of Steve's long takes and long film dialogue sequences, with a waiter sort of chipping in as well, sort of coming in every now and then, which I guess is sort of improv, you know, where it does have that sort of feel to it. And again, what an absolutely brilliant scene it is, completely riveting. And there's another scene in the movie where you see these characters having sex as well, not the waiter, although, you know, it could be that kind of movie, but Nicole and Fassbender have a scene in a hotel room which doesn't go well. Again, not at all titillating or appealing to people that are looking for that sort of thing. It's a very cold, rather disastrous sex scene. Then they have this long dialogue scene in the restaurant, and again, like the priest scene in Hunger, it is, you can't take your eyes off it. It's absolutely riveting.
Yeah, a fascinating film. Kind of a departure for the writer, Abby Morgan, who wrote this one, who also wrote the aforementioned Iron Lady and Suffragette. This is much more. I can't compare this to anything else that she's done. Really, you look at her sort of like. I mean, she did, apart from maybe Sex Traffic.
Yeah,
which she did.
Do you know what the sort of process was on that, Adam? Was that a script that was written with McQueen in mind?
It's co-written by Steve McQueen,
Right,
so I think he wrote with the writer.
Okay.
I don't know how much was improvised. I don't feel like McQueen's an improvised guy. I don't know.
I think it's just in this one scene with the waiter sort of popping in and out has got that feel to it. But yeah, I think you're right. He's very much a director who I think really wants to be in control.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is incredibly skilled in doing that.
So he's a British director, Steve McQueen. He's done a film about the IRA, which I can see being a major part of his upbringing, as it was with anyone in England, Ireland, during the 70s, 80s and 90s. IRA in Ireland was a big part of that kind of thing. He transposes his next film into New York, and it's the seedy underbelly of New York, sex addiction. And then we move on to his next film, 12 Years a Slave, arguably the film that he's most known for now, which is set during the plantation slave days in American history. Why do you think he went for this one? Because it feels like he's not drawing from his own experiences with these films anymore.
I guess that it's simply a story that massively appealed to him, and maybe he's heard tales passed down through generations of his own family about treatment that they've undergone, and maybe it's something that he can relate to experiences in his own life, and wanted to sort of make that comparison. We've talked already about how it sort of forms a loose prison trilogy. You've got Bobby Sands in the Maze prison, you've got the character in 12 Years a Slave who's sort of taken into slavery, and you've got Michael Fassbender who's got his sex addiction and is sort of trapped in his own mind and his own body. I think 12 Years a Slave, I think it's actually McQueen's most conventional movie. It's a bit of a departure in that sense. There's not as much of his usual style in there. It's a lot more conventional. But I just guessed that the theme and the subject matter and the story appealed to him. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he also linked it with his earlier two films and thought, well, yeah, let's do another prison story of a sort.
What did you think of 12 Years a Slave, Becky?
The biggest thing that I would say what I liked about, well, like's not the right word, but what I thought was different to other films around slavery and the slave trade is that it doesn't, particularly Michael Fassbender's character, in the sense of he's evil, but they make him human, which in a way is more scary, because other slave films I've watched, they create the slave owners being evil and devil and, pushes you to have those emotions. But what makes it more scary about 12 Years a Slave is that everybody there, the characters are more human. So you have more of a relationship with them, and sort of, I kind of felt with 12 Years a Slave, like, oh my gosh, I could imagine what it was like in those days, where some other slave films I've watched, they've sensationalized it a bit and pushed those emotions, I think of the right word, but push those emotions onto the audience, to feel this certain way or to feel that certain way about things. But what made it more scary was the sense that literally anything could happen. You were, that it was just so unstable. The environment and everything throughout the film just changes, and that's how I would, can imagine it was like in those days. I don't particularly like films around the slavery just because I feel like there's other stories that can be told. But if I was going to, in this way, recommend a slave film, it would be 12 Years a Slave, because it was the one I felt the most emotional about.
It is quite an interesting one you just mentioned there about, of all the slave trade films, as if it's like a subgenre of cinema.
Yeah.
Well,
but you're right.
I actually came up with the term. I think it was when Django Unchained came out, and I wrote something on that somewhere, and I came up with the term plantation exploitation at that time. And I think Becky's right in saying that if you call these films plantation exploitation, I don't think that 12 Years a Slave fits under that banner, because I think it's more serious. I think obviously you've got things like the classic being the TV series Roots, which has been done in, well, it was done as an original series, then a sequel, and then there was the recent remake. But then you've got more frivolous stuff like Django Unchained, maybe, like Russ Meyer's Black Snake and things like that, and other films going back to the 60s and 70s, that Mandingo and things like that, being taking a sort of more exploitative sort of look at this sort of thing. And you're absolutely right, Becky, in saying that Fassbender, Benedict Cumberbatch's character is actually quite nice in this movie, and yet he's still a slave trader and a slave master, And even the Brad Pitt character, who sort of comes in towards the end, who's like the nice white guy, there's even sort of underlying tendencies there, and all of the white characters have got sort of nuance, and they've got shading to them, and they do occasionally show a certain modicum of respect, but ultimately they're there to sort of tell people to sort of whip other people and to sort of abuse them and send them out into the fields. And again, I think that would be part of the appeal to Steve McQueen in taking on a slaver sort of subject matter, would be that it ties in with the themes of his other movies, but it's a more conventional, sort of more obvious film for him to do. Again, I think he achieves his long takes that he loves to do. One thing he does particularly well in the movie is he does static close-up shots of nature. You'll occasionally get a lingering shot of like a flower or a plant or a leaf or a branch of a tree or something. He uses these absolutely brilliantly. Not in the way that someone like Terrence Malick does. You may disagree, but I don't like the way that Malick has sort of introduced this into cinema, and it's become like a Malick trademark. Oh, we'll show a ladybird on a blade of grass or something. I think McQueen does it in 12 Years a Slave as punctuation. What you'll get is a horrific scene of somebody being whipped or chained or abused or something, or kicked around, and then he'll cut to a shot of a flower and he'll hold that for 30 seconds or a minute. And I think it's a means of bringing the audience down. I think it's there as a sort of easement into the next scene, a sort of controlling mechanism to say, OK, I've just shown you the most horrific thing that I possibly can. Now, here's something, I'll show you something nice while you think about what you've just seen and while you sort of mull that over in your own mind. And there are moments like that in his other movies as well, in the two preceding films. And I think here he does it to perfection. I think he does it absolutely brilliantly. And, OK, he's doing static shots of nature in the way that other directors have done, but I think he invests them with a meaning, and he invests them with a sense of offering something to the audience. And it's also a means of making the audience sort of think about the previous 2 or 3 scenes that they've just watched, which might be absolutely appalling and show the absolute worst of humanity.
So Obviously, it was a very successful movie, winning many Oscars and lots of critical acclaim, but it was also not without controversy and without backlash, particularly around the, I guess, casting of a lot of black British actors rather than black American actors, which seems to be a ongoing trend in American cinema at the moment, where I mean a lot of I guess it's not just in terms of black and white, but like a lot of British actors are going to America and playing American roles.
Yeah, I suppose Steve's defence there would be that he's a British director and they're the people that he knows.
It's not a good enough defence, Darryl. Well. It's not a good enough defence. That's not a good enough defence. He's a director making a film about the American slave trade, and yet he chose to cast a predominantly a British cast there.
Yeah, I can see why American actors are annoyed, because to be honest, I would be annoyed, if there was a story about the black British, experience or something that happened, in black British history and it was played by Americans, I would say the same thing. I think that's more, we need to look at the British film industry and think, well, we need to create more stories about the black British experience that these actors can be in. They're having to go over to America in order to get roles, and that's like the wider issue just with our film industry.
Of course, hopefully small acts has sort of redressed that balance a little bit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of black British stories that can be told, so it's kind of a bit of a shame, but I understand both sides of the coin. I can understand why African American actors are annoyed, because it's their experience, their stories, such as Harriet Tubman and Solomon. But also understand the black British actors in the sense of we don't tell those stories. Well, at that time, we didn't tell those stories that much. So they had to go over to America to find work, and just generally to find work in the film industry. It doesn't particularly have to be black story,
You think about it, currently Batman and Superman are both played by British actors, So, two icons of American pop culture being played by Brits.
Yeah. But I think that's a completely different discussion about lack of opportunities in Britain and sort of the way that we, do things. And then also as well, it's Hollywood. They're going to go over there.
Yeah. And all that said, though, the British actors that are in this movie don't have to do a good job. I mean, we've got Chiwetel Ejiofor, who has links to Derby, his family in Derby.
Yeah.
So he's Derby. That's how we do these things now. If you've got any sort of link to Derby, you're from Derby. Welcome back, But yeah, Chiwetel Ejiofor does an amazing job in the lead role.
Yeah, brilliant.
Always been an actor that you feel is waiting for was better than the roles he was being given.
I think so.
And then suddenly
what a difficult part this is as well, because you're almost playing two characters.
Yeah.
He's this sort of well-to-do free man, successful businessman, and suddenly, like that, he's a slave. It's not your usual slave story.
No.
He's not Kunta Kinte. He's not been kidnapped from Africa. He's not been born on the plantation. He's a guy who's sort of respected around town. He's known. He's successful. He's moneyed, and then suddenly he's a slave, and it's different. It's not. It isn't the sort of standard routine. It's not roots,
Yeah, no, we was having this conversation recently with a friend about when you watch some of these films, because the experience is such a powerful story, you feel like there's been loads of movies made about it. So, I think you said earlier, Becky, it's like it's not just another slave trade film. Exactly. It's not just another plantation film. And I'm thinking, well, even if it was, how many slave trade films are made? There's still not that many. There's more war films made every year.
Yeah,
there's more films about World War II that are being made, yet people don't make the accusation that genre is being run into the ground. Yet that does get levelled at the films that are set during the slave trade, which I find fascinating, because I felt like that. I was watching it, I feel like I've seen this before, and I was like, I have, but that doesn't mean it can be told again in the same way as like you get World War II films told over and over again. It's a similar experience.
Sure, and this is a very different story to any that we've seen before. So it's almost like a fresh approach to the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it adds a new level of obscenity to it. It's awful enough that people were sort of taken from their homeland and transported to other countries in ships and abused by white slave masters and so on and sold. For this to happen to someone who's actually achieved the American dream and is then taken into slavery is maybe that's something that a white audience can identify with a little bit more.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
But it I'm not saying it adds a new level of horror to the situation, because I think this it's something that's removed from the roots experience. This is a different way of telling the story, and of course it's all based in truth and based on an actual account written by the man himself. So
I think it definitely adds that layer of being able to put yourself in the character's shoes. What would happen if I was taken from my life?
And as I say, I think that can apply to all races. Anybody watching that film will think that. Yeah.
But that's what I would say about it in the sense of the human aspect. I haven't watched any other slave trade film where I feel like, oh my gosh, this, I can really see this properly happening to me.
Okay, so moving on to Steve McQueen's next film, Widows, which was another unusual choice for him here, I guess, adapting a British television series, slightly more mainstream movie. It's a car chase. It's got a heist movie. It's got explosions. It's got, heist movie planning, which is always great. Yeah, what do we think to Widows?
I liked that it had a leading lady instead of a leading man in Michael Fassbender, and it was Viola Davis, who I'm a huge fan of. So at the time, she'd just done Fences, and she was on the TV with How to Get Away with Murder. I thought her performance was brilliant in the film. My only criticism would be that I kind of wanted there to be more stories about the other widows, but I think I'm being a bit picky there.
It is an unusual left turn, as we've talked, Darryl, before earlier today. Like his first three films kind of form a trilogy of incarceration and prison type movies, and also are heavily male centric. And with this film, he definitely goes off in a different direction with female-centric movie. It's not a heist movie. It's not a prison movie. Yes, it's certainly a left turn.
Yeah, as a confirmed auteurist, I love the way that Steve's first three feature films all connect together, and they've all got these sort of interconnected themes. And this sort of stands apart from that. And I love the film for what it is. It's a great version of a great TV show, but I sort of wonder what's in it for him. Why has he been interested in this, and why hasn't he made something that has sort of connected with the ideas and concepts that he's used previously? And it doesn't quite fit for me, as I'm someone who loves it when a filmmaker comes along and you sort of know what you're going to get, and you know what themes to look out for, and suddenly there's this curveball thrown in.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely an about turn from what he's done previously, but maybe that's what he was going for. Maybe that's a deliberate decision. Is that, again, a switch from very male-centric storylines to a very, very upfront female-focused movie with an astonishing performance by Viola Davis.
Yeah, she's an absolute powerhouse in it. And Becky was saying how the other actresses and the other female characters don't figure quite as much in this, and I think the intention was that they would, and I think they give good performances, and the characters are well drawn and well written, and the way the film plays out has a lot for them to do, and they get sort of satisfying conclusions at the end. But Viola Davis is such a force of nature in this movie. It is one of the great performances in cinema in recent years, that she almost sort of unbalances the whole thing. She's so good that she makes everyone else look as though they're not there. And that's not entirely to the film's detriment for me, because I think it's good that there's a sort of forceful character, but this isn't the story of a central gangland figure and her female gang. You know, they're all supposed to be equals. And yeah, it maybe doesn't quite play like that.
Yeah, it's widows, not widow. So, you know, act a bit less good, Viola.
Yeah. I don't think you can.
No. It is an interesting point because it does feel like it's separate to those first three for many of the reasons we already discussed. But Steve McQueen's back on script writing duty here. He's co-written with Gillian Flynn of Gone Girl authorship. So he's obviously had more of a hand in the scripting of this than for instance, he didn't script any of 12 Years a Slave, officially. It was written by John Ridley.
So it's clearly an important project for him.
Exactly,
it's something that he sees as fitting into his scheme of things, even if I don't.
Yeah, exactly. So he feels like he's obviously invested enough to take a screenwriting credit on it. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Becky?
I think it was just a project that probably appealed to him. I don't think he necessarily wanted it to link to his other films. And also that it's kind of refreshing to have a heist movie that's so female orientated. They tend to, the ones that spring to mind with me, they tend to, if there are a female character in it, it's always along a male's, but this is very a female driven film.
Let's not forget Set It Off, late 90s heist movie. Let's not forget that one.
There's not many spring to mind.
No, I'm being picky there. I can pick one in the last 30 years, so you know.
Now we've mentioned Small Axe already a couple of times, and you were suggesting, Adam, that maybe we're in a new phase of McQueen's career, and maybe Widows starts that off. That perhaps he's done with the incarcerated males, either trapped in a cell or trapped on a plantation or trapped in their own body, sort of thing. And Widows and Small Axe maybe represent the start of a new phase where he's looking at sort of black characters' storylines, and he's looking at the interest that a lot of filmmakers seem to have at the moment in messing around and blurring the lines of what is a film and what is television. So if you want to take that up and
you've just literally said what I think, but that's maybe. We were talking about how some directors, some auteurs have those films careers where they have 10, 12 films where you can see the path. So like you think like Tarantino, you can see the path. But other auteurs, I guess things like Martin Scorsese, they have these patches of interconnecting films. So Scorsese, you've got his gangster movies that link together. You've got his period costume dramas that link together. You've got his rare comedies that link together. But they're not alongside each other. They seem jarring. But when you look at the whole career, so maybe we're looking at this Steve McQueen's career as this is a new patch of. So if we look back in 30 years' time, film historians looking back on his life and his career, it'll all make sense to them. We're living it now, and we're trying to fit his films into. Here's the jigsaw piece that doesn't fit. Well, maybe we're looking at ensemble. Because Widows is more of an ensemble, despite it being overbalanced by Viola Davis. It was envisaged as an ensemble movie.
And 12 Years a Slave is a big cast movie, but it's not necessarily what you'd call an ensemble, because it's a very sort of sketchy movie. It moves from place to place. We've got one character moving through the story and being sort of battered around and taken to different places. Whereas here, it's very much a group of characters who all interconnect. And maybe we're going to see that with the Small Axe films as well.
Possibly. Maybe moving into his Robert Altman phase of his auteur career. Who knows? But Small Axe is coming out very soon, 15th of November in the UK. 5 films depicting 5 different areas of the black experience, I guess. And some interesting areas, I guess, that we have not seen on screen before. it's a range of different stories. I mean, there's one about Lovers Rock, which will be a very popular title particularly in this country. I mean, we've shown films about Lovers Rock before,
which was really a British invention. It's a British spin-off from the reggae scene.
Exactly, yeah. So
in the same way, we've got things like Balti Curry, which are sort of based in Britain, and they're sort of inspired by Britain. So and Lovers Rock is our sort of contribution to reggae. It's a very
absolutely.
British sort of part of that scene. So.
Which hopefully brings Steve back to the UK and focusing on something British.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, for the first time in his career, I guess.
Yeah. And I suppose you can connect Widows with that as well, in that it started out as a British TV series. It then got remade as an American show about 20 years ago. And now you've got a British director with mixed nationality cast members in a version of the story that's set in the States.
There we go. We found the link, Darryl.
So
we found the link for you.
We got there in the end. Yeah. I'd like to mention one particular shot in Widows, which is just brilliant and which does connect with Steve's techniques that we've talked about. This idea of long takes, long held shots, and so on. There's an absolutely brilliant scene where Colin Farrell plays an aspiring politician who's the son of the character played by Robert Duvall, who is just... Duvall is almost as good as Viola Davis. Not that anyone is going to be, but he almost gets there. And Colin Farrell is trying to get elected locally as a sort of Chicago politician. And there's a scene where he gives this speech that's absolutely filled with banal platitudes, and it's staged in a rundown part of the city, and he gets into an argument with a journalist, and then he goes off in a huff and gets back into his limo with his assistant. And McQueen then shoots this entire scene from outside the car. The camera's sort of positioned outside the car, looking onto the bonnet of the car, sort of looking at one of the headlights. And we hear what's happening inside the car, a conversation between the politician and his assistant, his PA. But what we see is, if you focus on the background of the scene, the car drives, and it takes about 2-3 minutes. It drives from this terrible sort of rundown area, which he's talking about, sort of building up and elevating, but it's never going to happen. And the car drives and drives and drives, and gradually we see the buildings in the background and the houses becoming more and more well-to-do, more and more affluent, and then the car finally parks outside his political headquarters, which is like this ivy-covered mansion, and it's just so understated. And I'm sure a lot of audiences don't even notice it because you're listening to what's going on, and the focus, the main thing in the frame is the big black car. But if you look around the edges of the frame, you see the haves turning into the have-nots. It's a wonderful, wonderful shot. And that does, I think, that's the Steve McQueen of the previous 3 films.
Yeah. We talked about Steve McQueen previously in his role as inspiration to filmmakers. Do we believe he is inspiring a new generation of filmmakers?
Yeah, in a sense, I think he's one of many, but I think because he's quite well established now, I do think he's inspirational, and particularly with these, with small acts and things, and telling stories about the Black British experience, because it tends to be very focused on the African American experience. So it's good to sort of, it's good that he's doing more work, that showcases more or tells more Black British talent, and in doing so shows that you don't have to just do a gangster film to be successful.
I think the fact that he's done small acts shows that he's still forging ahead. He's still doing what he wants to, and he's done these big budget movies in Hollywood with massive stars. They are still very personal films. I think we've emphasised that while we've been talking today, and the massive budgets and working with Brad Pitt and working with Robert Duvall and so on hasn't spoiled him. You know, he's still Steve McQueen. He's still very much the person that he always was, and he's still doing the projects that he wants to do. And I think that in itself could well be an inspiration to the filmmakers that are coming up underneath him.
Yeah, I agree. I think in anybody who is making films, the quality of Steve McQueen is an inspiration to a new generation. It might.
I think the fact that his new stuff is, although it's been shown as films in film festivals, it's being presented to us in November as a TV series, effectively. I think because that'll get to a wider audience, I think that in turn will be an inspiration in itself.
Very good. So Small Axe is on in 15th of November, and shall we draw to a conclusion our discussion on Steve McQueen there?
No.
Cool. We should be back next month with another great topic. I want to thank the BFI and Quad for supporting this podcast. Do check out our Facebook page and our website for more information on our podcasts, including our lengthy lists of links that we make in these podcasts to other movies. So please do check that out, and we will see you next month. Take care.